We haven't even thought about how we're going to introduce this. We didn't come into the season with a goal of bringing on a fourth brand of skis. But here we are. We're going to do a little thing with Rossignol. Why?
Well, you probably remember better than I because you've been doing more of this stuff, but I think they approached us and they all came here for a meeting and they set us up with a huge fleet of test skis to try out over the winter, and it's just been a good relationship so far, and I think we'll move slowly and they're fine with that, and yeah, I think it adds a good addition.
It's an interesting brand, and it's one that I've always been curious about because it's quite different from the other brands in philosophy and execution. They build different skis. Mm-hmm. They're not trying to copy somebody else. All the brands have their own identity and their own way of moving, and I think one of the observations you've made this year, especially as we look at the new SX skate ski, is that even Rossi is sort of merging on the skate side toward a common performance profile that's getting closer and closer together among the top brands, but they're very much doing it their own way and always have. So as we look at brands, one of the things that we found over time is that we really need to work with a brand that's active at a World Cup level, developing skis for the best skiers in the world and actively trying to bring that technology to the public. It's a really difficult game to play if you're not plugged into that whole world of World Cup and the feedback loop that comes from that. One of the risks of that is that that world is quite insulated and they all start looking for the same things. They're very trendy, if you will. They tend to sort of follow the same ideas, and then a team that works a lot with one brand might go to another brand and say, oh, you need to do this more like these guys. So maybe everything kind of tends to focus in the same direction that way, but it's like Formula One. It's the pinnacle. It's the top level of performance that can be achieved, and therefore it's always going to gravitate toward a higher level. Also, from a marketing perspective, we can't sell an unknown. We need to work with established brands that develop their own marketing, support athletes, and have an image. It's too hard to launch something from nothing. So, we really need established brands that are strong partners and really good in development. It's a pretty short list, honestly. It's not a lot of brands. Rossignol's always been high on that list, and they've always had really interesting skis. And what's been most interesting to me is that I have the lowest understanding of Rossignol skis of any of the major brands because I just have never worked with them before, and it feels incomplete to me not to have made an effort with Rossi. So when they approached us, it was intriguing. It was almost like a challenge to say, what can we do with these? Amy's got a little more history with the brand. You raced them in college and after.
Was it in college or right after?
Yeah, it was in college.
It was in college. Yeah. Thank you, Jim Fredericks. Brought me on, and
thanks to Patty Ross, I think.
Well, initially, yes.
I'm pretty sure she bludgeoned him into it.
Probably, because I did pretty well on her old purple skis. But yeah, I skied on Rossi for quite a while, and I actually always really loved their skate skis in particular. So yeah, it was nice to hop back on Rossi's, and in particular their skate skis, and it felt very familiar and they felt very competitive. So
Amy did some racing this year, kind of mostly under the radar.
Yes.
Neither one of us has had the very best winter physically in terms of fitness and performance, but she did some racing, and of the race efforts, you ended up picking Rossi's in an open field a couple of times.
I did, yeah.
Why?
Well, I mean, in all fairness, I think we waxed up what we thought would be good from just about every brand, which we always do because it's an opportunity to test them. And in both conditions, the Rossi's are very directional, meaning like you put it down, it goes that direction, which for me means stability and means something else for Zach. I think with his knee, but I kind of like that when I think both times there was a really hard base or snowmaking underneath, and then stuff on top, but kind of it would get down to the ice or be super squirrely. And in both those, I felt like you needed a little, like the lightest ski was not going to feel very good because it would just get bounced around. The Rossies felt a little more stable, like settled, and also just very stable or directional and fast. So those were why I chose those in those conditions, which seemed like we had a lot of those all winter.
We did.
So,
We did. I had some really good days on them.
yeah.
I had some really bad days on them, especially early on. I had one full-on PTSD episode on those skis, skiing up in Forêt Montmorency.
Yeah.
And there's this loop there. It goes way up high, and then it goes down
On
a road.
Forest Service road.
On Forest Service road.
Yeah.
So it's a big, wide Forest Service
Yeah.
road, and it goes down a long hill. It ditches like 800 feet of vertical or something on one descent. And we had been out skinning up Stratton, and I ended up there, and my poor beat up knee simply couldn't take the percussive force of setting an edge and coming down, and I got really wide-eyed and scared. I'm never scared on skis. I was terrified for my life at Stratton. It's really a foreign thing to me to feel that way. And then we went up to Quebec, and I was on these 188 S2s that were pretty stiff, and they were fast, but they were so bossy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really chunky, squirrely snow that had heavily transformed. It was warm, it was crud, it was unpredictable, it was squirrely, and I was getting skied by the skis. I couldn't stand on the ski and do anything to convince the ski what was going to happen. It was the boss of me, and it felt really bad. And when we started going down the hill, I felt like as soon as I was in a snowplow, I was doing nothing but alternatingly catching edges. I felt there was no way for me to self-arrest. Like, if I needed to slow down all of a sudden, a hockey stop, I was going to tumble off this. Like, I was afraid for my life. I've never felt that way in my life. And then when I got on the 183 skis of Amy's, I was like, oh, I can ski on these, which is terribly emasculating for a adult male, a big guy like me. Man, no, it's an interesting thing. I had some really good skis on them too. I took them up and skied with Jack Lang up on Oak Hill on the trails there on natural snow. The whole Dartmouth team was out. They were fast. They were awesome. I had the same skis I had been on up in Quebec. Really good skis. This S2 is an interesting ski in that it's got a thickness profile that carries a long way out, and it's quite stiff out in here. Pretty supple right in the tip, but boy, it gets meaty out here. And at the same time, the camber has this long arch, and they're trying to build a ski that has quite an elongated camber profile. I feel like, and I think I see, a short radius end to the arch. It comes down and really focuses pressure right out here. The ski's still very torsionally stiff and longitudinally stiff, and this whole thing transmits so much back that I feel like it's a very talkative ski, and you really need to be on it. One of the things I know about Rossignol skiers at a really high level, like if you look at Gus winning in Minneapolis, a lot of those guys V2, and they put the ski down directly down the trail, and they actually physically hop it up and out to the side. So it's like boom, kapoom, you know. They're redirecting the ski in the stride, and it's something that I think they develop around the construction of that ski, because it's not going to deviate from the direction you put it down in. It is the most directional feeling ski I've felt. We've always said that Solomons were really directional. They get that directionality from a long tail pressure, and it's a really fast setup. And as long as you have enough load on the tail, you have great directional control, but they're not bossy from the front. They don't steer you. The front of the ski doesn't steer you, whereas Rossies, they really do. You love that feeling, and I do not love the feeling. I find it really disruptive in some conditions. On hard track, like relatively smooth hard track, it's fast and it is easy to control, and it's pretty awesome. And on even firm base with enough snow on top that's light enough so that you can boss the snow around instead of the snow bossing you around, it feels great. Again, but in those tricky conditions, I struggled. Interestingly, what we don't have here is the SX ski, and that is a different thickness profile. We previewed that in a video from Lake Placid. So here's the deal. S1 is their cold ski. It has a cold base, and it shares the same thickness profile as the S2. So S1 and S2, same material set, different camber. The S1 has a much smoother transition at the bridge, lower angles, longer contact points. S2 is a more specific universal hard condition ski with a different camber, and the bases are different. But S1 and S2 materially are the same. The S3 is the clear base ski. We didn't get that this year, and we should have because we saw so much cruddy wet condition. But that has the thinner thickness profile that we previewed on the SX ski. We should really reference that video and send people to see that because we showed that. The SX and the S3 have the same thickness profile, and it's a much softer, more continuous material set. So the bending radius isn't just focused way out here and then doesn't stiffen quite nearly as much. And then again, there are differences in the camber profile between the SX and the S3. My feeling is that the SX ski is an exceptionally good universal ski that offers the Rossignol qualities of directional stability and incredible edge control. It has pretty much the same tail material profile and stiffness as the S1 and S2, and so it does really steer the ski from the tail, but the front continues to support stability really well, but is so much more forgiving and less talkative. And I think it's a great ski for anyone coming from another brand looking for an upgrade in edge security and directional stability. What was your take on it?
I like the SX. We just skied it up in Lake Placid, and I'd agree 100% with everything you said. I think it also might be a good addition, like in more fresh snow.
For sure.
So
I did ask those guys when we met on a video conference just last week whether there were thoughts of taking the S1 in that direction, building a cold ski in that profile. And they're fairly cagey. They're not going to tell me what their plans are for the future, but they did really acknowledge that the SX is something that came out as a request from athletes, not only a effort to make the ski more friendly to non-racers, and that it wasn't a specific soft snow ski. It might be marketed somewhat that way, partially because they want to continue to support the S1 and S2 brands that are, models, material sets that are really race proven and have a lot of history. So that's great. That all makes a ton of sense. Right now, if I was jumping into Rossignol, I would start my fleet with an SX ski. If I'm in a wet environment, who isn't at this point, S3 is great. The clear base from Rossignol, I think, is on par or very close to on par with Salomon's 126 base in front of the field of wet bases in the marketplace. It's really a very good base. So that ski gets used a ton and will continue to. And I think that thickness profile is really good. It's the same as the SX. I would treat the S2 as a more specialty hard track ski. I don't know that it's going to be very easy to beat it on man-made hardpack or boilerplate, icy, tough conditions. That edge security is huge. And for cold, I don't really know. We got so little chance to test these S1s. I almost feel like maybe I would prefer to look at an SX, but that's an open question. So we've got plenty still to learn with Rossignol. I wasn't convinced until we skied that SX ski. At that point, I feel like this is something we can work with. So, yeah, that's interesting. It's a good evolutionary story, and I think it's a very, very strong brand, particularly in skating. When we first talked with Rossi, some of the issues that needed to be addressed from our mind were access to the material. They've had to make arrangements, and it's going to be pretty much a pilot program this year to be able to have access to pick the skis from available inventory. It's not how their warehousing works, but they've made an effort in that direction. One of the things that Rossi has always had by reputation is very different production skis from World Cup skis. The production skis are made in their factory in Spain. The World Cup skis are made in their corporate headquarters in France, in a tiny factory that can produce very few skis. There's no way they can produce enough. For many years, the only skis being used at a World Cup level were the French skis. In the last few years, they have made a very strong effort to bring the material set, the design, and the camber control from their French production skis to their Spanish production. As a result, they have seen more and more Spanish skis showing up in the World Cup. And I can't remember the specifics that they told me, but I know that they've won races this year. And I think in Minneapolis, I believe that both Gus and Goldberg were on Spanish skis. I think that's what Evan told me. I would have to confirm that. But we'll just start the rumor here. Or maybe he already has. I don't know. Yeah. On the classic side, I think we struggled a little more, which isn't to say we didn't have some good days. I think you had one day at Prospect, I believe, on this low C2, where you had a phenomenal hardback ski, like really, really good. Now here's what I have found about these skis and why I have questions and possibly some issues. When we're looking at these skis, one of the first things we like to do is isolate the bridge and measure the stiffness. The bridge stiffness, material stiffness inside the pocket on these Rossignol skis is close to 20% softer than pretty much every other brand we deal with. So when you have softer material and you need to create carrying capacity, you can either shorten the bridge a lot, which brings up the stiffness geometrically, or you have to create a higher camber or a shorter bending radius, so more arch. The bending radius in the camber on these skis is way, way higher, or I'm sorry, it's shorter. So it's a steeper curve in these skis than anything else. That results, since it's so steep in here, in a ski with quite a high resting camber compared to others. And with relatively strong material outside the bridge, that means that you have a lot of deformation and pretty strong material out here. So the ski holds a bunch of energy out here. Now, all of this is on purpose. Those guys feel strongly that they have maybe the best skis in the world on the World Cup. They're really happy with their World Cup skis, and it's the same philosophy being used there. They're looking for softer material that comes really quickly. They want to ride high, fully disengaged, not feel the wax at all, and then hit it. I think you can see this in the way Rossignol skiers ski. But I also think that it makes a ski that's a little difficult to work with at times. One of the other things is that the pockets tend to run quite flat. Again, we don't have C3 skis in our test batch, but in the past, I've often felt like the C3 pocket shape was more familiar and easier to work with because it had some of that residual camber we talked about previously on Fischer skis. The C1 is really a flat pocket. And in fact, because of the softness of the material, it's not uncommon for it to invert, to close out in the middle, for the curve to actually collapse. And so I brought this up in our video conference, and one of the things that they suggested was that we should look at some of the successful French skis that are being used on the World Cup. They know they have a lot of work to do to bring the success, the unquestioned success that they have at a World Cup level, to the Spanish production. In the meantime, I've seen a lot of success on these skis. We need to learn more about how we're working with them, and what we really need is to work with athletes. So what we've told the Rossi people is that for this year, we're not going deep on classic skis. We have more to learn. I don't want to offer them with the same level of confidence we bring to our other ski selection picks, not because it's lesser material, but because it's a design philosophy that we haven't worked with enough to really understand well enough. We feel like the fit window's small on these skis, and we need more supportable skis to be really confident in. In the meantime, established Rossi skiers, we would love to work with you on this because we need to learn. And it would be awesome to bring some successful skis in, taking a look at them, take some measurements on skis that we know people are having week in, week out success with, and learn something from that. we tend to focus on the strengths of every brand we work with. And we also need to acknowledge that often weakness is in us, not in the brand.
Yeah.
Part of the reason we wanted to work with a brand that's quite different and that we haven't worked with in the past is that it gives us a chance to learn a different way of looking at these skis. So far, this one's been pretty easy to understand on the skate side. And with that SX ski, feels like a really natural step. On the classic side, lots to learn, and we'll see. I think we'll know a lot more after visiting those guys and handling some of the material in person. In the meantime, that's the program. We will do a limited selection this year, focused mostly on pre-ordered product. We will have not very much available in season. Our goal is not to make this huge, but to dip a toe in the water. We don't know whether we're robbing sales from other brands with existing customers or bringing new skiers to our business. All of this has to be determined. And whether it works in the long run will really just depend on how those brand, supplier, us, and skier relationships evolve. So we'll see. It'll be fun. A new project.
Yeah, it'd be cool.